The spring of 2002 was supposed to be Luis Rodriguez's best semester. He'd made varsity soccer, his grades were up, and he'd promised his mother he'd walk his younger siblings home every day without complaint. But on March 14th, that 8-minute walk became a 22-year mystery that would devastate two families and expose a mistake so tragic that even hardened criminals couldn't live with what they'd done. Phoenix, Arizona. March 14th, 2002, 3:15 p.m. The bell rang at Jefferson Elementary like it did every weekday. 500 kids poured through the gates, backpacks bouncing, voices echoing off the concrete. Among them, the Rodriguez siblings moved as a unit, Luis leading, 14 years old, already tall for his age, Maria behind him, 12, clutching her math textbook, Tony, 10, dragging his Batman backpack, Elena, 8, skipping despite the heat, Rosa, just 6, holding Elena's hand tight. 8 blocks to home. They'd walked it hundreds of times. Their mother, Carmen, would be waiting with fresh fruit and questions about homework. Their father, Miguel, wouldn't be home until 6, still at the auto shop where he'd worked since they arrived from Tucson 5 years ago. Normal family, normal routine, normal Thursday afternoon. Except 2 miles away, in a warehouse off Van Buren Street, 3 men were loading guns into a white van, studying a blurry school photo and planning to take Rico Morales' children. The photo showed 5 kids, ages 6 to 14, 3 boys, 2 girls, just like the Rodriguez siblings, just like them, but not them. Rico Snake Morales ran the east side for the Nogales cartel connection. He'd pushed too hard into Sinaloa territory, taken corners that weren't his, killed people who shouldn't have died. The Sinaloa response was coming. Not for Rico directly. He was too protected, too paranoid. But his children walked to school every day. Same route, same time, no bodyguards. Rico thought the street code would protect them. Nobody touched kids, that was the rule. But rules were breaking down in Phoenix that spring. The war was getting personal. 3:20 p.m. The Rodriguez kids stopped at Circle K. Luis had $3 from mowing Mrs. Chen's lawn. He bought 5 freeze pops, 1 each, exact change. The security camera caught them clearly. Maria helping Rosa with the wrapper, Tony reading a comic book he couldn't afford, Elena dancing to the radio playing behind the counter. They left at 3:23, turned south on 27th Avenue. Mrs. Patterson saw them from her porch, waved, remembered thinking Elena's yellow dress was pretty in the afternoon sun. But here's what nobody knew that afternoon. The Morales children were homesick. All 5 of them. Stomach flu had swept through their house and Rico's wife had kept them home. The school had marked them absent, but the absence list hadn't been updated in the main office. When the Sinaloa crew called their inside source at Jefferson Elementary, asking if the Morales kids were there, the secretary checked the wrong list. Yes, she said, all 5, present today, 3:26 p.m. The white van turned onto 27th Avenue. Driver, Manuel Crow. Delgado, 31, 2 tours in Iraq, came back wrong. Passenger, Hector Ruiz, 25, needed money for his mother's dialysis. Back seat, Carlos, whisper. Mendez, 19, trying to prove himself, stomach full of meth and nerves. They'd been watching the school for 3 days, but from a distance. They knew 5 kids, knew the route, knew the timing. They didn't know faces. The photo they had was 2 years old, blurry, taken at a baptism. Could have been any 5 Mexican kids in Phoenix, 3:28 p.m. The van pulled alongside the Rodriguez siblings at the corner of 27th and Oak. No witnesses on this stretch, empty lots on both sides, a defunct body shop with boarded windows. Hector jumped out first, grabbed Rosa and Elena, pulled them toward the van before they could scream. Luis turned, shouted, tried to fight. Crow was already out, bigger, stronger, trained, hit Luis once in the solar plexus, threw him in. Maria tried to run, Whisper caught her hair, dragged her back. Tony just stood there, frozen, until they grabbed him too. 8 seconds, start to finish. The van door slammed, tires squealed, then nothing but Rosa's freeze pop melting red on the sidewalk. Inside the van, chaos, Rosa crying, Elena screaming, Luis trying to get up despite zip ties on his wrists. Maria was silent, calculating, looking for a way out. Tony had wet himself, shame mixing with terror. Crow drove fast but not reckless, taking surface streets toward the warehouse. Whisper held a gun on them, hands shaking. "Shut up," he kept saying. "Your dad did this. Blame your dad." Luis found his voice, hoarse but clear. "Our dad works at a body shop. He fixes cars. You got the wrong kids." The sentence hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Hector looked at the kids. Really looked. The girl in the yellow dress didn't have the birthmark Rico's daughter was famous for. The oldest boy had green eyes. Rico's were all brown. The math started failing. Whisper grabbed the photo from the dashboard, held it up, compared. Different kids. Completely different kids. "Jesus Christ," he said, "these aren't them. These aren't the Morales kids." But they were already at the warehouse, already too deep. The kids had seen their faces, heard their names. Crow killed the engine, sat with his head on the steering wheel. The original plan was to hold Rico's kids for 24 hours, make him sweat, make him negotiate, then release them with a message. Nobody was supposed to die. It was supposed to be business, but these weren't Rico's kids. These were nobodies, and nobodies who could identify them were problems. 3:47 p.m. Carmen Rodriguez started worrying. The kids were always home by 3:45. She called Luis's cell phone. It rang in his backpack in the van. She called the school. They'd left on time. She called Miguel at work. He said give it 10 more minutes, maybe they stopped at the park. But Carmen knew. Mothers know. Something was wrong. Inside the warehouse, the kids sat on the concrete floor, hands zip-tied, backs against the wall. The men argued in Spanish, thinking the kids couldn't understand. But Maria spoke perfect Spanish, their parents' Spanish, and she translated Whispers to Luis. They were debating what to do. Let them go and run? Too risky. Keep them until they figured it out? Too dangerous. The third option nobody wanted to say out loud, but it hung there like smoke. 4:15 p.m., Carmen called 911. The operator told her to wait 24 hours. Kids wandered off. They'd turn up. Carmen screamed into the phone about 5 kids, 8 blocks, never late. Something happened. The operator took the report, but didn't flag it urgent. 5 Hispanic kids in Phoenix missing for an hour didn't make anyone run. The warehouse had no windows. Industrial district, abandoned buildings on all sides. The kids could scream forever, and nobody would hear. But they didn't scream. Rosa had cried herself into exhaustion, curled against Elena. Tony stared at the wall, dissociating. Maria kept whispering prayers. Luis tested the zip ties, looking for weakness. He was 14. He was supposed to protect them. He was failing. Crow made the first call at 5 p.m. Not to Rico Morales, but to their boss, Alejandro Viejo Gutierrez, sitting in a Scottsdale mansion. Explained the situation. Wrong kids, witnesses. What now? Viejo was quiet for 30 seconds. Then, "Fix it. Clean it." Never happened. The line went dead. Everyone in the warehouse knew what that meant, but here's what changed everything. Whisper was 19, had a little sister Rosa's age, watched her crying, snot running down her face, asking for her mom in broken sobs. He couldn't do it. "I'm out," he said. "I can't kill kids." "I won't." Hector agreed, surprising everyone. His mother was dying, yeah, but she'd die of shame if she knew he hurt children. That left Crow, trained killer, but even he was struggling. These weren't enemy combatants. These weren't even enemies. They were mistakes. They kept the kids overnight, hoping for a solution that wouldn't come. Fed them McDonald's, let them use a bucket for a bathroom, didn't hurt them beyond the zip ties. Luis memorized everything. The men's faces, voices, tattoos, the warehouse layout, the van's license plate he'd glimpsed. If they lived, he'd remember everything. If they didn't, maybe someone would find his body and he'd have scratched the information into his skin. March 15th, 6 a.m. The Rodriguez children were all over the news. 5 kids, 1 family, vanished without a trace. Their school photos on every channel. Carmen sobbing at a press conference. Miguel stone-faced beside her, fists clenched. The whole city looking. Tips pouring in, all useless. Nobody had seen the van. Nobody had noticed the grab. 8 seconds had swallowed 5 children. Viejo called again at 7 a.m. "Is it done?" Crow lied, said yes. But Viejo had eyes everywhere. He knew they were stalling. You have 1 hour, or I send someone to fix you too. The warehouse went cold. Now they were all dead if they didn't comply. Whisper started loading his gun, hands shaking so bad he dropped bullets. Hector threw up in the corner. Crow just stared at the kids, seeing his own nephews, his own choices, his own damnation. 7:45 a.m. Crow made a decision, drove the van to the desert 20 miles out, old mining territory. The kids in the back, silent now, understanding what was coming. Found a ravine, deep, hidden. Whisper and Hector waited with the children while Crow went down to dig. The sun was already brutal. Rosa asked for water. Hector gave her his last bottle, couldn't look at her face. But here's the thing about desert soil in March. It's still hard from winter, packed tight. Crow dug for an hour, barely made a dent. The hole was too shallow, would never hide 5 bodies. Vultures were already circling, sensing something. Time was running out. Viejo would send his cleaners soon. They had to make a choice. Whisper broke first. I'm taking them back. I'll drop them somewhere safe. But Crow knew better. They'd seen too much. Cops would have them in hours. They'd talk. Everyone would burn. The cartel would kill their families in retaliation. There was no version where this ended well, but there were versions where it ended less badly. The decision came at 9:23 a.m. Not from planning, but from panic. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Border patrol maybe, or just cops checking the area. The men spooked. Crow grabbed his gun, turned to the kids. Luis stood up, put himself between the gun and his siblings, 14 years old, shaking but standing. Please, he said, they're just kids. I'm the oldest. Take me. Let them go. That moment of bravery broke something in Crow. He'd killed 16 people in his life, could remember each face, but he couldn't add 5 kids to that list. Not kids who were taken by mistake. Not a boy willing to die for his siblings. Not a 6-year-old who still believed she was going home. The sirens got closer. Decision time. Crow turned the gun on Whisper and Hector instead. Run, he told the kids. That way. Don't stop. Don't look back. They didn't move. Didn't understand. He fired into the air. Run! They ran. All 5, holding hands, stumbling through the desert toward the sound of sirens. Crow watched them go, then put the gun under his chin. The sound echoed off the canyon walls. Except that's not what happened. That's what Whisper would tell police 22 years later, dying of liver cancer, trying to clear his conscience. The truth was simpler and worse. They killed them all. Quick, at least. Crow made sure of that. 1 bullet each, didn't let them see it coming. Buried them in that shallow grave, covered it with rocks. Drove back to Phoenix in silence. Reported to Viejo that it was done. Collected their money. Tried to forget. But you don't forget killing 5 kids. Hector overdosed 3 months later. Suicide that looked like an accident. Crow disappeared into Mexico, was found hanging in a Juarez motel in 2004. Whisper lasted longest. Tried to drink the memory away. Failed for 22 years. Only told the truth when the cancer gave him 3 weeks to live, and he couldn't take the faces in his dreams anymore. March 8, 2024. Phoenix PD got the call from Whisper's hospice. He wanted to confess. Gave them coordinates, exact location, drew them a map with a shaking hand. The search team found them the next day. 5 small skeletons, exactly where he said. DNA confirmed within hours. The Rodriguez children, still wearing their school uniforms. Luis still had $3 in his pocket. Rosa still had a freeze pop wrapper clutched in her hand. The news broke nationally. 5 kids. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong faces. Killed for looking like someone else's children. Rico Morales, the intended target, had been killed in prison in 2009, never knowing his enemies had murdered the wrong family. His own 5 kids grew up, moved away, never knowing how close they'd come to dying at ages that matched the Rodriguez siblings exactly. Carmen Rodriguez had never stopped looking. 22 years of private investigators, psychics, age progression photos, hope against hope. When the police came to her door with the confirmation, she didn't cry. She'd cried all her tears years ago. She just asked if they'd suffered. The detective lied, said no, said it was quick. Carmen knew he was lying but accepted the kindness. Miguel had died in 2018, heart attack, the doctor said, but Carmen knew it was heartbreak. he never got to bury his children. The funeral was March 20th, 2024. Closed caskets, obviously. 5 white coffins in a row, sized small to large. Luis, Maria, Tony, Elena, Rosa. The whole city came. The mayor, the governor, strangers who'd followed the case for decades. The priest talked about innocence, about tragedy, about God's plan. Carmen said nothing. What was there to say? Her babies had been dead for 22 years while she set their places at dinner every night, just in case. Whisper died 2 days after the funeral. His confession inadmissible in court, deathbed, no corroboration, other suspects dead. No one would ever be prosecuted. The Sinaloa connection was too old, too cold, too careful. The warehouse had been demolished in 2005. The van crushed and recycled. The only evidence was bones in the desert and one dying man's guilt. But there was one more twist. The secretary at Jefferson Elementary, the one who'd given the wrong information about which kids were at school that day. She'd been paid $500 to say the Morales kids were there. She thought she was helping with a custody dispute, never knew what she'd really done. She came forward after the bodies were found, confessed everything, couldn't live with it. She'd caused 5 deaths with one wrong word. The guilt destroyed her. She took her own life a month later, left a note saying she was sorry, so sorry, but sorry didn't bring back 5 kids. The Rodriguez house still stands on 28th Street. New family lives there now, doesn't know the history. But neighbors say if you walk past at 3:45 p.m., you can sometimes hear Carmen calling her children home for dinner, 5 names echoing down the street, never answered. The city put up a memorial at Jefferson Elementary. 5 bronze statues, children walking home, frozen mid-step. The plaque reads, Luis, Maria, Tony, Elena, and Rosa Rodriguez. They were just walking home. The Circle K where they bought their last freeze pops closed in 2010, but the empty lot remains. Someone always leaves 5 freeze pops there on March 14th. They melt in the Arizona sun, running red and blue and purple into the cracked concrete like children's blood that won't wash clean. Nobody knows who leaves them. Nobody asks. In the end, the Rodriguez children died for nothing. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong faces. 5 kids who looked too much like 5 other kids. A mistake that rippled through decades, destroyed multiple families, ended multiple lives. All because someone thought gang wars were worth more than children's lives. All because someone couldn't tell the difference between one Mexican family and another. All because 8 minutes and 8 blocks became forever. The last recording of the Rodriguez children is that Circle K security footage. Grainy, black and white, but you can see them clearly. 5 siblings sharing freeze pops, walking home from school, Luis counting change, Maria helping Rosa, Tony reading, Elena dancing, normal kids on a normal day that became the worst day. The timestamp reads 3:23:47 p.m. 3 minutes and 13 seconds before they got in the van. 3 minutes and 13 seconds when they were still just kids walking home. 3 minutes and 13 seconds when their mother was starting dinner and their father was changing oil, and nobody knew that 5 children were about to disappear into a mistake that would take 22 years to undo. The freeze pops cost $3. Luis had exact change. The receipt is in evidence now, the last thing he ever bought. 5 freeze pops, 5 kids, 5 graves in the desert, math that adds up to nothing but loss.